Hello and welcome to World News Program. I'm your host, Krifa Zachary, and these are today's top stories. Ukrainian officials released footage from Zaporizhia showing damage from shelling which killed 2 civilians. North Korea fired this Thursday another 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. Also in our news, the OPEC Plus announced a major production cut of 2 million barrels per day starting from November. Also coming up, former policeman killed 34 people including his wife and 22 children in a mass shooting at a daycare center in Thailand on Thursday. Hello again and welcome to the program. Fast in our news, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud confirmed his personal participation in the Arab Summit to be held in Algeria. After receiving the invitation from Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Somali president added that his participation in the Algiers Summit would also establish an opportunity to talk in depth with President Abdelmajid Tebboune, especially about ways to strengthen and promote the relations that unite the two brotherly countries and peoples. Algerian Foreign Minister Mtala Mamra held face-to-face talks with his Portuguese counterpart, J. Gomes Convenio. The talks were extended to include the delegations of the two countries, during which they reviewed relations between Algeria and Portugal, cooperation and good neighborliness signed between the two countries in 2005. The two ministers also discussed the partnership between Algeria and the European Union, stressing the importance of establishing balanced relations that guarantee the interests of both countries. Portuguese Foreign Minister João Gomes Cravinho affirmed his country's attempt to develop the historical relations with Algeria, stressing the importance of relying on the friendly and stable countries with Portugal that trusts in light of the current international circumstances. Let's listen.
Bonjour.
I was honored to be received by Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. I conveyed to him the sincere greetings of the Portuguese president, assuring him of our interest and keenness to invite him to visit Portugal within 2023. This visit will be an opportunity to strengthen the relations of friendship and cooperation between our two countries.
A post-Brexit UK-Morocco trade agreement is being challenged in the High Court by campaigners who argue it was concluded without obtaining the consent of people from Western Sahara. This news comes actually when the Western Sahara Campaign UK, which supports self-determination for the Sahara people, has brought legal action against the Department for International Trade and the Treasury over the UK-Morocco Association Agreement. The group alleges Morocco is unlawfully occupying Western Sahara, and that controlling and trading the territory's resources without consent lacks any legal basis and is akin to expropriation. Head of the Libyan government of the National Unity, Abdelhamid Dbeibah, defends the memorandum of understanding signed with Turkey in the field of energy, saying it was based on previous agreements. Dbeibah said that his country would continue to explore oil in its territorial waters in occupying or in cooperation with neighboring countries. He noted that Greece had begun excavating off Crete and that his country would not allow its right to explore to be waived.
There are some countries who oppose this agreement, but frankly, I don't care about that. I don't care about these countries' opinion. What I care about is that my people would understand what can Abdelhamid Dbeibah do, or what can this government do for Libya. We're going to make other agreements with several countries to cooperate with us to discover, produce and sell the Libyan gas in Libyan territories. In terms of the distance between us and the island of Crete, they must come to the international judicial body to solve this problem with us. This problem is still ongoing, and we will never give up calling for our right on Crete Island.
Former policeman killed 34 people, including his wife and 22 children, in a mass shooting at a daycare center in Thailand on Thursday. 12 people were also injured. According to police, around 30 children were at the center when the gunman arrived. He shot 5 staff, including a teacher who was 8 months pregnant. The shooter, who shot himself dead after triggering the bloodshed, served as a policeman. However, he had been discharged from the service for drug-related reasons. Moving on now, Ukrainian officials released footage from Zaporizhia showing damage from shelling which killed 2 civilians. An emergency vehicle driving through the city's night streets was on its way to the site of the shelling. Regional Governor Alexander Saturuk stated that shelling by Russian forces killed at least 2 people overnight and damaged or destroyed several residential buildings and caused widespread fires. 1 woman died in the shelling, another one on the way to the hospital as a result of 7 Russian strikes. North Korea fired this Thursday another 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan, just 2 days after launching an intermediate range, one that flew over Japanese territory, increasing the tension in the region. Let's follow.
North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles on Thursday and assured that its recent weapons tests are retaliatory measures against the military exercise deployed in the area by the United States and North Korea. The Japanese defense minister strongly condemned North Korea's move, saying the country's escalating provocative actions are absolutely unacceptable.
North Korea today at around 6 a.m. launched 2 ballistic missiles from its inland area towards the east. We are still analyzing details, but it fell around North Korea's east coast area in the Sea of Japan, outside of our executive economic zone.
South Korean president also pledged to ensure his country's security through a strong alliance with the United States and cooperation with Japan following North Korea's missile tests.
IRBM is aiming to strike strategic assets that will be deployed to the Korean Peninsula. Due to the severe situation these days, the USS Ronald Reagan, which was heading to the next post after completing the South Korea-US joint exercise, entered waters off South Korea at around 8 p.m. last night.
For its part, North Korea released a statement by the state's foreign ministry condemning Washington for repositioning a U.S. aircraft carrier in the waters of the Korean Peninsula, saying it posed a serious threat to the stability of the situation. The USS Ronald Reagan and its strike group of accompanying warships was abruptly deployed in response to North Korea IRBM launch over Japan. In turn, China blamed the U.S. for North Korean ballistic missile launch, accusing it of poisoning the region's security environment.
On
the nuclear question, the United States plays a double standard and is engaged in a political maneuver, poisoning the security environment of the region. Against this backdrop, hate and tensions on the peninsula should come as no surprise.
In less than 2 weeks, the isolated Kim Jong-un regime fired 6 projectiles, in addition to causing evacuation orders in Japan, and marked distance record in the history of the North Korean arsenal.
All right, moving on, the OPEC Plus announced a major production cut of 2 million barrels per day starting from November to bolster oil prices that have recently tumbled over recession. Sofian Kanturi reports.
The Organization of Petroleum Exposing Countries and its allies announced on Wednesday a major production cut of 2 million barrels per day, in addition to bolster oil prices that have recently tumbled over recession. The reduction equals around 2% of this year's global oil demand, which is estimated by OPEC at around 100 million barrels per day.
We always opted for making sure that we are attentive. And to be attentive, you have to be assertive and preemptive. You know, our priority now is stabilizing market. Now, we could be accused of wanting to influence market in a negative way, that's everybody's prerogative. You and others will see how we conduct ourselves in the months to come.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Wednesday that Washington has made it clear to oil-producing countries that the need for energy supply has to meet demand after OPEC Plus agreed to its deepest cuts to oil production in years.
And when it comes to OPEC, we've made clear our views to OPEC members. We have a multiplicity of interests with regard to Saudi Arabia, and I think the President laid those out during his trip, and they include everything from regional relationships.
Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak claimed on Wednesday that Russia may cut oil production in order to counterbalance negative processions from price caps imposed by the West over Moscow's action in Ukraine.
Next in our topical news, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, urged EU leaders on Wednesday to reconsider their position on capping gas prices when they meet for a special summit this Friday in Prague in an effort to rein in skyrocketing energy costs.
We needed sort of an alternative forum to engage with these countries, namely the Western Balkans and the associated trio, for example, while the accession negotiations continue and while the countries and the candidate countries continue to work on their respective accession EU paths. So this is, and I think this was one of the motivations of French President Emmanuel Macron, and this really created sort of some sense of skepticism and suspicion, and really the suspicion that this was maybe, and also the perception that this was being seen as an alternative and offered as an alternative to EU membership. I think over the past couple of months, the debate has evolved significantly, and this was discussed at the EU level as well, and various EU leaders came out to confirm and to reiterate that this was not an alternative to EU membership.
Nigeria's military has secured the release of the remaining 23 hostages from a train attack by gunmen in northern Kaduna state that was in March, which saw dozens kidnapped and 6 others killed. The government blamed the attack on terrorist insurgency Boko Haram. The attack on the Abuja-Kaduna train led to the suspension of service that was popular with passengers who feared attacks and kidnappings by gunmen on Nigerian highways. Moving on now to a different story. Over the 7 million people that are experiencing acute food insecurity was blamed on the failure of 4 successive rainy seasons. The United Nations has warned that parts of Somalia will be hit by famine in coming months as the Horn of Africa region faces a 5th consecutive failed rainy season.
Somalia and its resilient people are facing some of the most complex and interconnected crises in the world. The crises include ongoing regional droughts, which is directly threatening the lives and the livelihoods of Somalia's most vulnerable communities.
Still in Africa, in Ghana now, a group of military and the National Disaster Management Organization personnel are on a mission to rescue residents of Ashalaja in the South Municipality of the Greater Accra region. Other adjoining communities have been flooded with houses submerged following a heavy downpour at dawn on Monday. Moving on now, at least 80,000 people have been affected by the heavy rains that flooded most of Darfur region and other cities of Sudan. People have been living in dire situation after they were displaced to makeshift shelters. Most of the affected people have lost their houses and large amounts of crops, which put the citizens in severe need of humanitarian aid. Osama Ayadi.
Heavy rains and flash floods in Sudan have left 80,000 families in need of humanitarian aid as they live in extremely dire circumstances left by the disaster that stranded them. In the farming village of Zaid, a village in South Darfur, tens of thousands of homes, boreholes and agricultural fields have been destroyed or damaged over the past months in what residents say it is the worst flooding in a decade.
We have been seriously affected. My house was damaged. All the furniture was damaged and carried away by water. This room is now completely destroyed. Yesterday that water came inside the house, it broke everything. And now I have many cracks in the walls. All my beds are broken and all my jerrycans have been carried away by the flow. I didn't manage to recover anything. And now we sit in the water.
Floods also damaged essential infrastructure, increasing the risk of water-borne diseases such as cholera. Most families now live in makeshift shelters after their homes were destroyed.
The water came into the control room and the borehole collapsed, and all the water pipes were broken. All the pipes serving this side and that side, going south, north, and east.
So now we are here. In this very basic shelter, even plastic sheets we received were not enough. This is all what people can get now, and we don't know what to do. We lost everything, and this is where we are staying now.
Communities are not only facing climate shocks, but conflict and violence, as well as poor harvest and skyrocketing food prices. Over the past year, the International Committee of Red Cross recorded a 187% increase in the price of food items in conflict-affected areas of Sudan where it works. And this brutal inflation is still rising to make people's lives more difficult.
This season is different from the past seasons. Our oldest people say that nothing like this happened since the 80s. This year there is much more water in southern Darfur. Rain rates this fall are above normal rates.
Nationwide, more than 150,000 people have been affected by flooding this year, double the number at the same stage of last year's rainy season, which apparently makes the situation of most affected areas in the country unlivable.
The Thai capital Bangkok and central areas are bracing for severe flooding triggered by heavy rains this week that have already impacted more than 45,000 families in nearly half of Thailand's provinces. Experts urge the government to take immediate actions and consider long-term plans to deal with such terrible situation, as rescue workers have received many calls for help. All right, moving on to the U.S. now. U.S. President Joe Biden met with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Wednesday to survey the devastation following Hurricane Ian landfall in Florida. Both the president and the governor stressed the need for united federal and state efforts for recovery. Islam Sid reports.
The U.S. President Joe Biden declared that he and Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis are working on a long-term plan to rebuild Florida in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian that tore through the state last week. Biden, along with his wife, traveled to Florida on Wednesday to survey the devastated areas, where he met his top critic DeSantis and the victims of the hurricane.
We're thinking of you, and we're not leaving. We're not leaving until this gets done. I promise you that.
I want to thank Administrator Criswell from FEMA for being on the ground, being supportive, and being very responsive. I think one of the things that you're seeing in this response, we are cutting through the bureaucracy. We are cutting through the red tape, and that's from local government, state government, all the way up to the president. So we appreciate the team effort.
During the visit, Biden insisted he and DeSantis are putting politics aside and pledged federal support for cleanup and rebuilding effort that could cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Biden also emphasized that the rebuilding effort will take months or even years.
We're working to speak to all those issues because they all warrant immediate responses. I've instructed my administration to bring every element, I mean every element of the federal government together to help with immediate needs and long-term rebuilding. Everything is historic, titanic, and unimaginable storm just ripped it to pieces. You got to start from scratch, got to move again. And it's going to take a lot of time, not weeks or months. It's going to take years for everything to get squared away in the state of Florida.
The scope of the devastation was massive, with winds as high as 240 kilometers per hour. Hurricane Ian killed more than 84 people, including 75 in Florida. Many people are still struggling with the power grid, and many others are still unable to get access to food and water.
On Wednesday, a member of parliament from Lebanon went to Byblos Bank, location north of Beirut, with a group of friends to demand access to her frozen savings so as she could pay for surgery. as depositors have grown frustrated over the informal capital controls that banks have imposed since an economic downturn that started in 2019. Cases of bank holdups and protests have increased recently throughout all Lebanon.
The situation has become unbearable. The rampant corruption in banks and the whole political class is now just in your face. This is why we came here today with Cynthia, and we won't leave until she takes her savings, or parts of her savings. The amount she demanded to be able to do her operation that she has to do. We won't leave.
Human Rights Watch has accused Tehran of employing excessive repressive measures, including lethal force, against participants in weeks-long nationwide anti-government protest, which was sparked by the death last month of a young woman arrested by Iran's morality police. The report stated also that the organization had so far compiled a list of 47 individuals who have been killed, most by bullets. The names included at least 9 children, 2 of them girls and 6 women. And for more international news, let's follow this roundup.
Japan has not yet reached an agreement to co-chair a debt summit with Sri Lanka's creditors as the island nation struggles to find a way out of crippling economic crisis. Sri Lanka has to renegotiate around $30 billion of foreign debt, including with bilateral creditors such as China, Japan, and India, with one of them likely to co-chair the talks.
Brazil's leftist presidential candidate Lula da Silva maintains a clear lead over right-wing President Bolsonaro, as the candidate scrambled to win over voters ahead of an October 30 runoff. The survey taken over the 3 days since the first round vote found Lula with 51% voter support against Bolsonaro's 43%, with a margin of error of 2 percentage points.
The White House National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson said the United States has no plan to change its Venezuela sanctions policy without constructive steps from Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro to restore democracy, as he put it. In exchange for the sanctions relief, Maduro's government would resume talks with the country's opposition to discuss conditions needed to hold free and fair presidential elections in 2024.
The leader of the delegation made a strong statement that Germany rejects any military threats by a bigger country against their neighbor with the goal of annexation, and that Germany has a clear stance on what is right and wrong. A 5-day visit to Taiwan, the delegation was the first from Germany to visit the island since the start of the pandemic.
To a lighter note now, the Algiers International Comic Festival FIBDA continues on its 3rd day. Visitors have the opportunity to discover Arab and foreign creative exhibitions and workshops supervised by professionals. Zara Farjani went there and brought us the following.
It's FIBDA's 3rd day, and like every year, visitors are pouring into the exhibition and workshop spaces in the Algiers International Comics Festival, as cosplayers perform their roles wearing entertaining costumes and accessories.
So I'm also an artist. I draw. In last year's FIBDA, I participated in a techno concours and I won a prize. I am so happy that I would like to do it again.
你好，我是黄金龙。I'm wearing a hanfu. A hanfu is a kind of traditional Chinese clothes.
Because it's Let's Draw Our Patrimony theme, participants from around the country came to share their art in a drawing competition, while others joined the event for the comics and Japanese manga. The 60th anniversary of independence is embodied in this year's FIBDA, in an image that combines history with modernity.
En tant que premier ambassadeur,
as the first ambassador who died as martyr in Algeria, Mustafa Farouqi is not known, and also to show young public that it's possible to tell a story of a martyr through comics.
A gaming zone was one of the exhibitions of this year's FIBDA, as visitors had the chance to test high-tech games.
The goal of this event is to represent gaming in Algeria and to improve the state of esport also in Algeria. We have here different contestants are competing in the Valorant discipline, and also FIFA 2022.
I came here today to FIBDA, so because I'm a player, I'm going to be playing in the LAN tournament. It's the first edition, I guess, in this year.
The Algiers International Comics Festival will continue its activities of the 14th edition for 5 days, combining fantasy and reality in a pedagogical and entertainment program.
Actor Alec Baldwin and producers for the Western Rust have reached a settlement with the family of the movie's cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who Baldwin shot dead during filming last year. Under the deal, the family's civil lawsuit against Baldwin and others will be dismissed, and filming of the movie will resume in January with all the original principal players. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our program draws to a close. Thank you for tuning in. And for more stories, you can visit our social media platforms. That's the end. Bye for now.